her mother knew. Not suspected, not feared, knew. The last time they were in the same room together, Darlene Hamlet looked at her 55-year-old daughter and said the words plainly. "Do not go back." She told Lynette directly that she believed Brian was going to kill her. Lynette Hooker had a plane ticket. March 11th, 2026. She had booked it herself, packed her intentions into a departure date, and made a plan to leave the Soulmate, leave Brian, leave the life she had documented for 4 years on the open ocean. She did not use it. 24 days later, on the night of April 4th, 2026, Lynette Hooker went into the water near the Abaco Islands in the Bahamas. She has not been seen since. Her husband Brian says she fell from the back of their small dinghy at around 7:30 in the evening. He says he could not reach her. He says he drifted alone across the Sea of Abaco for hours before washing ashore at 4 in the morning. That is his account. But on the night Lynette disappeared, when the harbor at Aunt Pat's Bay had gone quiet and the boats sat still in the dark, a woman on land heard something. Not at 7:30, at 9:30, 2 full hours after Brian says Lynette went into the water. From the direction of the Soulmate, a sound loud enough, distinct enough, out of place enough, that this woman remembered it, reported it, and is now part of an active federal investigation. The Soulmate is currently sitting in Fort Pierce, Florida, in federal custody, behind crime scene tape. Forensic processing is active. Evidence bags have been seen coming off that boat. This is the open file. And this is the case of Lynette Hooker, a woman who had a ticket out, a mother who begged her not to go back, and a story that does not end at 7:30. Stay with me. Before we continue, subscribe to The Open File and turn your notifications on. This case is moving, new developments are coming, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Onsted, Michigan, a small town, the kind of place where people know your name and your family's name and your grandmother's name. She had built a life there, a house, a career, possessions accumulated over decades of adult life, and then she gave all of it up to live on the water with Brian. 4 years on the Soulmate, 4 years of sea turtles and sunsets and cinnamon rolls baked in a solar oven. She documented it with the kind of openness that only comes from someone who genuinely believes the life they are living is worth sharing. Her Instagram was full of it. The ocean at golden hour, the quiet mornings at anchor, the small, beautiful details of a life most people only dream about. Her last caption said, "Not going anywhere for a while." She has been missing since April 4th, 2026. But before we get to that night, you need to understand something about the months leading up to it, because this story does not begin on April 4th. It begins earlier with a mother who was afraid and a daughter who went back anyway. Darlene Hamlet is 76 years old. She lives in Florida. She had watched her daughter's relationship with Brian closely, and what she saw frightened her. She sought advice from battered women's shelters. She tried to make arrangements, and on March 11th, 2026, Lynette had a plane ticket, booked, confirmed, ready to leave Brian. She didn't use it. 24 days later, she was gone. Darlene told Ashley Banfield something privately, something Jim Todd later shared on the record. The last time she and Lynette were together, Darlene told her daughter directly, "Do not go back." She said it plainly. She told Lynette that she believed Brian was going to kill her. Lynette went back anyway. That is not a judgment. The psychology of these relationships is complicated in ways that are genuinely difficult to understand from the outside. There are financial ties, emotional history, years of shared life, and the belief, sometimes the desperate hope, that things will be different this time. Leaving is rarely as simple as deciding to leave. But Darlene knew. She said it out loud. And this is where we are. April 4th, 2026. The day before Easter, a Saturday, Brian and Lynette arrived at the Abaco Inn on Elbow Key at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. They spent the next 2 hours by the pool, drinking, relaxing, the kind of easy afternoon that looks completely normal from the outside. At 6:34 in the evening, a local fisherman named Joe took a photograph. He wasn't trying to document anything. He was just taking a picture, but in it, without knowing it, he captured what may be the last known image of Lynette Hooker alive. Surveillance footage from the inn, reviewed later, shows Brian and Lynette leaving at approximately 6:38 in the evening. Lynette's daughter and her boyfriend confirmed this timeline. The light was still on the water. It was not yet dark. Brian has stated that they left closer to 7, maybe 7:30. The photographic and video evidence contradicts this directly. They left earlier than Brian says, which means there was more daylight than Brian acknowledges. Which matters, because part of Brian's explanation for losing sight of Lynette involves the darkness. They left the inn and headed toward the dinghy. The plan, presumably, was to return to the Soulmate, anchored roughly 1,000 yards offshore. What happened next is where everything falls apart. Brian's account is this: Lynette fell from the back of the dinghy. He was unable to retrieve her. He drifted for hours across the Sea of Abaco, eventually washing ashore at Marsh Harbor at approximately 4 in the morning. He knocked on 2 doors. Nobody answered. He flagged down a car. The driver looked at him and kept going. He eventually made his way to the boatyard. Lynette was wearing a black 2-piece bathing suit, he told the search teams. He mentioned nothing else. It was only later, well after the initial search parameters had been set, that it emerged. Lynette had also been wearing a green bathing suit cover-up, a bright green cover-up, visible in the photo taken at 6:34. Brian never mentioned it. Not to Jim Todd, not to the police, not to the rescue teams who were searching for her in the water. That omission matters, and it is not the only one. Let's go through Brian Hooker's account carefully because the details are important. He says Lynette fell from the dinghy at approximately 7:30 in the evening. He says he could not retrieve her. He says he drifted across the Sea of Abaco, roughly 4 miles, and reached the shore of Marsh Harbor at around 4 in the morning. That is approximately 8 to 9 hours on the water. There were 2 life jackets in the dinghy. Neither was thrown to Lynette. The dinghy had an anchor on board. It was not deployed. Brian has a military background. He is not an inexperienced person. He has spent 4 years living on the ocean. The standard response to a person overboard: throw a life jacket, deploy the anchor to stop the boat from drifting, get back to the person, did not happen. Brian's explanation for this has been vague and inconsistent across different accounts. There is also the question of what Lynette was doing. Brian has given conflicting statements about whether he heard her call out after she fell, about whether she was swimming toward the sailboat or toward shore. In one version, he heard something from her. In another, he heard nothing. When Jim Todd pressed him directly on which direction Lynette was swimming, Brian could not answer clearly. And then there is the dry bag. Brian reportedly had a dry bag with him, containing important documents. It was not found at the scene. It did not surface during the search. A dry bag floats in 6 feet of water in the area where Lynette allegedly went overboard. It should have been visible. It was not. Then there is what happened at 4 in the morning. Jim Todd is not a television commentator. He is not a federal investigator. He is a volunteer with Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue. He lives and works in the Abaco Islands. He knows that coastline the way you know your own neighborhood. He was one of the first people to physically reach Brian Hooker in the early morning hours of April 5th. He pulled Brian onto the rescue vessel. He sat with him. He listened. He watched Brian's face. He asked questions. And then he took Brian back to the Soulmate. This week, speaking with Ashley Banfield on Drop Dead Series, Jim Todd said something about Brian's account that no other named, credible, on-the-ground source has said as clearly or as specifically. He said Brian's story about what he did after reaching shore is, and this is his exact word, inconceivable. Here is what Brian told people. After drifting ashore in Marsh Harbor, he knocked on 2 doors that didn't answer. He then flagged down a passing vehicle, whose driver looked at him and kept going. He eventually made it to the boatyard. Jim Todd knows exactly where the dinghy was found. He described what is to the west of that location. Thick scrub bush, impenetrable, completely dark, with nothing of significance for hundreds of yards. And he described what is to the north. Approximately 150 yards away, the boatyard, brightly lit, visible from the water, a landmark that anyone approaching Marsh Harbor at night would have been watching the entire time they were on the water. 150 yards. Lit up like a beacon. If you have just spent hours adrift on the ocean in distress, and you reach shore, and there is a brightly lit boatyard 150 yards to your north, you walk toward the light. That is what every person does. The probability of choosing instead to walk west into pitch-black jungle, through impenetrable scrub bush, in slides, not boots, not shoes, slides, approaches 0. Jim Todd's words, not mine. Brian was wearing slides when Jim Todd retrieved him, flip-flops, and Brian's story involves navigating through dense bush in the dark, over rocks he described to Darlene as sharp on his feet. Jim Todd's assessment was direct. In slides, you stay on the rocks along the shore and you walk toward the light. You do not go into the bush. You cannot go into the bush in slides in the dark. Then the doors. The only way Brian reaches any residential area at all requires traveling south, through more difficult terrain, across a water inlet in complete darkness, to reach a small subdivision of approximately 30 homes. 30 homes occupied by Bahamian families who live there year-round, not vacation properties. Homes with people in them. Brian knocked on 2 doors, got no answer at either one, and left. Jim Todd's response to this was simple. If you made it to a residential street, which would have been an extraordinary journey through dark terrain to begin with, and the first door doesn't answer, you knock on the next one, and the one after that. You do not knock on 2 doors and walk away. Nobody does that. Not someone who has just spent hours on the ocean. Not someone who needs help. Not anyone. And then the car. Brian flagged down a vehicle at approximately 4 in the morning on a Sunday in a remote area of Marsh Harbor, and the driver saw him and kept going. Jim Todd's assessment of that possibility, extremely far-fetched. The probability of a vehicle being on those roads at 4 in the morning on a Sunday is close to zero, and in a small, tight-knit community like Marsh Harbor, if someone is standing on the road waving you down, you stop. You call someone. You help. Brian's account of what happened between reaching shore and arriving at the boatyard does not work. Not geographically, not logistically, not physically. Jim Todd said that on the record, with his name attached. Now we get to the witness and the flare, because these two things, taken together, are what have shifted this investigation this week. Earlier reporting established that witnesses saw a flare from the direction of the Soulmate at approximately 8 in the evening. Multiple people saw it. Brian reportedly told Darlene he fired 2 flares, though there is also information suggesting only one was fired. Jim Todd said he had heard both accounts, but could not confirm with certainty. What Jim Todd could confirm, and what had not been reported before this week, is the direction of that flare. It did not go up, it went sideways, horizontally, along the surface of the water. A maritime distress flare is designed for one purpose: maximum visibility. You fire it straight up, as high as possible, so that every boat, every house, every person looking at the horizon in any direction can see it. That is the point. That is the only point. A flare that travels horizontally along the surface of the water is visible only in one narrow direction, only to the people who happen to be positioned directly in its path. It is not a signal to the world. It is a beam of light that most people will never see. And that is exactly what happened. A small number of witnesses in a specific location saw it. Not the boats at anchor, not the houses facing the Sea of Abaco. A small number of people who happened to be positioned at the right angle. Jim Todd reported this as secondhand. He heard it from someone who spoke to the witness directly. He was careful about that distinction, but the implication is something he said he could not stop thinking about. And neither can I. If your wife has just gone overboard and you have one flare and you need help, you fire it straight up. You do not fire it sideways. A horizontal flare is not a distress signal. It is something else. And then, 2 hours after Brian says Lynette went into the water, at approximately 9:30 at night, when the island had gone quiet and the harbor had settled, a woman on land near the Soulmate's anchorage heard something. Not from the dinghy. The dinghy was in the channel. The Soulmate was anchored at Aunt Pat's Bay. These are not the same place. From the direction of the Soulmate, a loud noise, significant enough that she remembered it, distinctive enough that she talked about it, the kind of sound that stays with you because it does not belong in a quiet harbor at 9:30 at night. Jim Todd was careful about the exact timing. He said his reading of the conversation suggested 9:30, but he could not confirm that with precision. A separate account places the noise slightly later, possibly past 9:30. What is consistent across both accounts is that the noise came after the island had gone quiet, after the normal evening activity had settled, when the only sounds should have been water against hulls. That witness has spoken to investigators. She is not speaking publicly. Her account is part of the active investigation. Jim Todd confirmed this directly. 2 hours after Brian says it was over, in a completely different location, someone heard something. The Soulmate's AIS, its automatic identification system, the vessel tracking technology that broadcasts a ship's location and movement, went offline at 9:29 in the evening on April 4th. It came back online at 8:34 in the morning on April 5th. 11 hours, dark. Jim Todd confirmed this timeline when Ashley Banfield shared it with him. His response was 3 words. That's a shocking bit of information. Here is what we know about the morning of April 5th and the timeline on that boat. Jim Todd and the rescue team arrived alongside the Soulmate at approximately 7:45 in the morning. Brian, in under 1 minute, gained access through the afterhatch. He and a police officer went below deck at 7:45. Based on Jim Todd's best estimate, they were below deck until approximately 8:45. 1 hour below deck, the AIS came back online at 8:34. Brian was below deck. He had been below deck since 7:45. He came back up at approximately 8:45. The AIS came back online while Brian was below deck in the navigation station, with a police officer present. I am not drawing a conclusion about who turned it back on or why. I am telling you what is confirmed and letting you consider what the timing shows. The Soulmate is now at Fort Pierce Coast Guard Station in Fort Pierce, Florida. It is in federal custody. Crime scene tape went up on May 13th. Ashley Banfield confirmed from a strong source that investigators found what was described as a forensic gold mine on that vessel. Evidence bags were seen coming off the boat. The processing is active. Whatever is on the Soulmate, investigators now have it. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His attorneys state he categorically and unequivocally denies any wrongdoing. Every individual referenced in this documentary is presumed innocent unless formally charged and convicted in a court of law. But here is where we are on day 43. The Soulmate is in federal custody in Fort Pierce, Florida, behind crime scene tape, and forensic processing is active. A witness heard a significant noise from the direction of that boat at 9:30 at night. 2 hours after, Brian says Lynette went into the water, and in a completely different location. The flare went sideways, not up. The AIS was dark for 11 hours and came back online while Brian was below deck. Jim Todd, who was there, who pulled Brian from the water, who took him back to that boat, has said on the record that Brian's account of what he did after reaching shore is inconceivable, every part of it. And Lynette's mother, Darlene Hamlet, 76 years old, waiting in Florida, told her daughter plainly, the last time they were together, do not go back. She said directly that she believed Brian was going to kill her. Lynette had a plane ticket. March 11th, 2026. She had planned it, booked it, prepared to leave. She didn't use it. 24 days later, she was gone. Darlene knew. She said it out loud, to her own daughter. And Lynette went back anyway. That is not the end of this story. The investigation is active. Evidence is being processed. The witness account is part of the official record. This case is moving. If you have any information about the disappearance of Lynette Hooker, you can contact the U.S. Coast Guard Investigative Service through the CGIS Tips app, completely anonymous. The Royal Bahamas Police Force investigation also remains active. Lynette Hooker was 55 years old. She was from Onsted, Michigan. She filmed sea turtles and photographed sunsets and spent 4 years documenting a life on the ocean that looked from the outside like everything she ever wanted. Her mother told her not to go back. She went back anyway, and a woman on land heard something from the direction of that boat at 9:30 at night. 2 hours after Brian says it was over. We are not done. If this story matters to you, and it should, subscribe to The Open File and turn on your notifications. Every case we cover is sourced, verified, and told the way it deserves to be told. Lynette deserves that. And so does every victim whose story we bring to this channel. We will keep going until there are answers.